Welcome back to Breakfast Central. Yesterday, the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions began a probe into the sexual harassment allegations leveled against the President of the Nigerian Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, by suspended lawmaker, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. The probe follows a petition submitted by one of her constituents accusing the Senate President of gross misconduct, abuse of office and sexual harassment. However, tensions flared during the probe following an exchange between Senator Peter Nwebonyi and the former Minister of Education, Dr. Oby Ezekwesili, of whom appeared before the committee as a witness.
This morning to share what exactly happened.
On her side of the story, we're joined by the former Minister of Solid Minerals, former Minister of Education, beg your pardon. We also have she's the co-founder of Transparency International, the co-founder of Bring Back Our Girls, and also she is a founder of Fix Politics, as well as School of Politics, Policy and Governance. We're joined this morning by Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. Good morning, Ma. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
I think a great way to start the conversation would be what exactly happened yesterday and why the allegations we're hearing would be that you may have incited him to react the way in which he reacted by telling him to shut up. I want you to please run us through what exactly happened yesterday.
Well, because we're all, I believe that we're reasonable people, you wouldn't say shut up or please shut up to anyone without a context. And that context was essentially that he apparently came to the session as a witness for the Senate President. So he wasn't in his capacity as a senator member of the committee. He was simply there as he introduced a witness for the Senate President, the respondent to the petition by Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. Now, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan could not be at that session because, as you know, she was illegally and unconstitutionally suspended from the Senate. And also the person who represented her as the one who signed her petition, according to the procedural rules of the Senate, was the one we accompanied. I accompanied him along with Dr. Abiola Akiode Afolabi, who was also in the place of a counsel to him. And so the beginning of the conversation was actually very inappropriate in the sense that the chair of the Senate, as well as the members of the Senate, basically said we were unserious just because the petitioner, Mr. Suberu Zaraluma, had indicated that he wanted to raise objections before taking an oath, and they said he couldn't say anything to them without taking an oath. So he said that the objections I want to raise are material for what I am required to say about the petition. At that point, we had a situation that was very reminiscent of a determination to shut down people on the basis of Senate rules. So the lawyer then said to him, you go ahead and take the oath, and then use that opportunity to do the objection. And following from that, I said I also wanted to take the oath as a witness, because I was there in my capacity as a person globally who is the chair of the Women Political Leaders, a flagship organization based out of Brussels that brings together all women political leaders around the world female presidents, female prime ministers, female parliamentarians, and ministers in governments around the world. I only 2 years ago took over from former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Mrs. Helen Clark. And so I was a witness, also recognized by the committee yesterday. Except that every attempt to say this petitioner needed to be granted his right to make the objection that he had, which were two. He said, number one, I do not have confidence in this committee because it has publicly taken positions that are not complementary to my senator. Therefore, I will not expect that any presentation I make to them will be giving objective response. And the gentleman further said that for him, he needed that a special committee be instituted so that he would have the confidence to present the petition. And number two, that his senator, who is the principal witness, is not with him just because she is under suspension and was told that she couldn't come anywhere near the National Assembly. So he wanted them to lift that suspension so that she would be with him and accompany the statements that he would be making. It was really impossible to get through with those very reasonable requests by the plaintiff, by the petitioner. And so that was the context within which we not being allowed to support him, and yet a senator, not a member of that committee, who came and said he was representing the Senate President, the person accused by Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, had himself jumping into the time that we were asking to be allowed to speak and saying, if they are not serious to do their presentation, then I am ready. I'm here to speak. And he was allowed to speak without taking the oath that they made an issue for us. So it was unequal treatment of the voices of citizens who were at that session yesterday. And then he carried on. I mean, how could you describe us as unserious and that you were there to do your presentation for the Senate President? It was a continuation of this pattern of behavior. I think it was a continuation of this pattern of behavior of shutting down the voices of those that you think do not have a right to express. So when he did that, I said to him, can you please shut up? We're speaking. We have a right to express. And that was the beginning of his torrent of insults. That's what happened, actually.
I think that anything may have been done differently, given the benefit of hindsight.
I actually do not see what could have been done differently from our side. This was a side in the room that was, basically experiencing a toxic response by the committee. And this senator that released the torrent of insults was basically empowered because they did not stop him. You could hear when I did say that I take exception to this senator being allowed to speak and to release these insults while the chair was in the seat. So I basically want you to know that to the extent that we would not stand up to those moments when voice is being stifled, to that extent, are we determined to hand over our democratic culture, our democratic privileges and our rights to people who have a pattern of abusing their power.
Now, Dr. Ezekwesili, you've worked in Nigeria at the highest levels. You've been a two-time minister. You've had international engagements. You're widely traveled and known across the world. Looking home, looking at our culture in Nigeria, do you think there's a culture of silencing women in Nigerian politics? And how do you think this can be addressed if this is so?
Well, at least number one, making sure that it becomes a public topical issue is critical, because normally the silencing of the voices of women happens behind closed doors. They happen in situations where there are no witnesses to them. But what studies have shown across the world is that 1 out of every 3 women suffer one form of gender-based violence, including sexual ones, at one time or the other. That's a significant data to work with. And in Nigeria, we have never had a situation where a woman of the status of Senator Uduaghan actually took the stand that she wasn't going to back down and that she was going to make public the kind of harassment that she has faced in the hands of the Senate President of our country. That on its own is something that must be supported, because when people know that when they speak up, the society will be willing to support them in demanding for what is appropriate. What is appropriate? What is appropriate is that Senator Uduaghan should be given fair hearing by a committee that is not tainted in the way that we have seen with the Ethics and Privileges Committee, where different members at different times have taken public positions on her allegation without any independent investigation or public hearing that enables the two parties to the matter to actually put their cases forward.
So would you say that, this fair hearing, what picture would you say it looks like? Would it involve her still, the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions? Would you say that you've lost faith in this committee, or would you want a completely independent body to look into this matter?
It has to be a new committee that persuades the petitioner that she would be presenting to people who will be objective in listening to her petition. It has to be that. And it has to be accompanied by independent investigation. One of the things that we know is that the ICPC has sexual harassment as one of crimes stated as corruption under that act. So if you have an independent investigator accompanying the public hearing, which my emphasis is on public, it needs to be broadcast so that people follow on the basis of transparency. The issue at stake is accountability of public institutions and public officials when necessary. We are losing it because what the Senate has successfully done, even yesterday, is to say that they are not going to offer that opportunity to Senator Uduaghan. Do you know that what they did yesterday was at the end saying, oh, by the way, there are 2 cases in court that would make it sub judice for us to listen to the petitioner. So why did you go through the whole charade of inviting him, of recognizing those of us that came with him as witnesses for the petitioner, and then go through that whole rules of the Senate, rules of the Senate, rules of the Senate, and which at some point made me say to them, you appear to suggest that the rules of the conduct of the business of the Senate have attained a stature superior to the Constitution and the laws of our land. I do not think that that is our constitutional democracy. So clearly, the Senate has refused to do what the society expects it to do. It has now decided to make Senator Natasha a defendant to a case that was instituted by the wife of the President of the Senate, whom she did not at all mention in her petition. So that's what they have done. They said, okay, there's these 2 cases, we're going to respect it. The same people who did not respect the judgment that the High Court, the Federal High Court, gave to Senator Natasha when she asked that they be restrained because she was not clear that she was going to get fair hearing from them. They ignored it and went ahead and suspended her. But suddenly, the court mattered to them yesterday because they are determined to dodge this allegation. They do not want this allegation to be treated in the way that is necessary in order to ensure that justice is accorded any of the 2 parties involved.
Now, Dr. Ezekwesili, what do you say to disillusioned Nigerians, especially women who are looking at everything playing out now, the suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, the sexual harassment charges, the incident that happened at the Senate Ethics Committee meeting yesterday where you were shouted down on. They feel disillusioned in politics in Nigeria. What will it take to correct this? What's your message to young women?
I think the message would be to young women and to men and to the society at large. So to the young women, nothing must ever shut down your voice. No one. It doesn't matter what power they have. I need them to understand that I have been in the public space for more than 30 years of my life, especially at the time when I became a co-founder of Transparency International. In all the 3 decades, at different stages, because of my voice, I have had to face a pattern of bullying of one kind or the other. I refuse to shrivel in the face of it. You cannot allow your voice to be taken from you. God gave you that voice. The more that we can have women understand the power of their voice, the better it is for our society, because development research shows that representation matters. Nations that have understood this are when they do the ranking of innovative societies, that is, societies that have the most innovation, it has been part of the reason that they became productive societies that became prosperous societies. So this is critical. We cannot say to our women that they cannot express their voice. We also cannot use this stifling of the voice of women, the mischaracterization of women when they choose to make their voice count, a decoy, that it's actually it's a tool for ensuring that women are silenced permanently and cannot attain or access political power. We've seen it in women political leaders. It doesn't happen here alone. But what the difference is, and that's where I'm talking to the larger society, is that societies have come out collectively to say, no, you cannot do this. And when there has been that collective momentum to say these kinds of systems and structures and cultures or norms that impede and basically stifle women will not be tolerated. The entire society of Nigeria has the opportunity now to define a different approach for the engagement of women and our girls.
What about the women?
Public discourse and leadership.
You speak to women and talk about the voice and the power that women wield and the influence, and oftentimes how people will try to stifle it. But what about the women who have been criticized for not speaking up in support of other women? The female senators in that house who were criticized for not standing up for Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. I would like you to speak about them, as well as Honorable Charity Jesse, who is a special assistant or special advisor to the Kogi State Governor on Youth and Women Mobilization, that had championed the cause for her recall. So please speak to these two scenarios, as well as the role that women have in being able to champion the voices of other women.
Okay, I would hope that your colleague would speak in the way that you speak, because I hear you more clearly than I hear him. So you've asked a very important question. What we have found is that because of the long period, the historical nature of this idea that women must be silenced, even some women become inheritors of that legacy, of the culture of silencing women. So they are really victims in some way, because they do not see the right and the power that they have to not be enablers of this culture, of this system. And therefore, when they do it to their fellow women, they do it as part of that entrenched system that exists. So it does take a lot of enlightenment of why that should not be so. I have seen instances in other societies where women have done things like this because they did not understand that it was not about the single individual that was going through that situation in that moment. Some just look at Senator Uduaghan and judge her in all kinds of ways, and then take a position on her against looking at the facts of what she's presenting. Now, that is confirmation bias. These are things that behavior modification alone can change. And so we must invest in that, and in a sustained manner, educating not just the men, but also the women, starting early to educate the boys and the girls. All of these are important for moving forward on this important matter.
But would you like to
Second
speak? Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Whilst you're saying that, I wanted you to speak in particular, ma'am, to these senators as well. Yes, please.
Yes. So, on the matter of the recall and the woman that submitted the recall, I think that already, by virtue of her position, she ought not to be the one submitting any recall, whether appropriate or fraudulently acquired. I think that what is critical for us is to see how they have exposed themselves, that rather than focus on the request of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, who has such incredible legitimacy with her constituency, rather than focus on her legitimate demand for fair hearing. They have instead tried to silence her, tried to, just completely sideline her. And that is why the recall is being purchased from what we can see. But you know what? Our eyes are on INEC, because the threshold for establishing the veracity of a demand for the recall of a senator, we will ensure that all of that is satisfied, because the genuine constituents of Senator Uduaghan are in fact standing with her all the way. And Nigerians must condemn this kind of politically charged and fraudulently acquired process of recall for a senator who just needs justice.
Just to quickly put a nail to this part of the conversation, I'd like you to speak to the female senators. At the time, they hadn't in any way shown their support. Would you have any particular message you would like to send to the likes of Senator Ireti Kingigbe and all the other female senators in the House?
Former senators, too. Female.
Well, it is not about Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. It is about the systemic, institutionalized, and structural processes that inhibit women. And so for those who think that it is about a single individual, they will know in their heart of hearts that they have faced one form of gender-based violence or the other. And so for the other three senators, as well as the former senator, who instead of facing the facts of the matter, being that Senator Uduaghan was making an allegation and therefore joining her to demand fair hearing, I would say that is a monumentally missed opportunity to make this an issue that changes the systems that erect barriers against women emerging in politics and in public spaces, even in private sector as leaders. We need more women leaders, not less. Nigeria is at the bottom of women representation in politics at about 3.7%. It is not, therefore, a coincidence that we also are at the bottom of all governance indicators that are done, comparing nations. It is therefore not a surprise that we're at the bottom in terms of human development indicators. It is not therefore a surprise that we are at the bottom in terms of economic growth, economic development, and of course, economic opportunities for all of our society. They all matter.
Now, madam, there's a section of society that has been screaming she doesn't have evidence, she should show evidence of sexual harassment, she needs to show proof, and she's just being emotional about the whole situation. How do you address this issue of showing evidence for sexual harassment? Does she owe it to the public, or does she owe it to the Senate Ethics Committee or law courts to prove these allegations?
I mean, I think it's the issue of critical thinking, right? Critical thinking and logical mapping would tell all of us that a person who makes an allegation within a democratic context must be allowed the space in which she provides her evidence. Senator Natasha Uduaghan doesn't live in a lawless society. In a democratic society, within the rules of the Senate, she needs to get her fair hearing at a properly constituted committee that has the confidence that she desires, because not because she wants it, therefore create it. It is because all of us who are reasonable people in society, we have indeed seen the bias that is already there. The fact that a position has already been taken by the existing committee that she could have gone before and laid her complaint and backed with evidence. So she's not been given that. She's not supposed to go to the internet and say, these are my evidences. No, it doesn't work like that. So it's really a matter of critical thinking and logical frame.
From what you said, madam, it seems you've lost faith in the fairness of this committee as currently constituted. If so, what's the way forward? And why did you say you don't trust that she'll get fair treatment from this ethics committee as currently constituted?
You have to repeat, please.
Why do you say that she might not get fair hearing from the Senate Ethics Committee as currently constituted, and what would be the best way forward for you?
I already said that her own premise is that she was already judged by some of the members of that committee and the senators at large in the way that her complaint, her petition has been treated, and that she therefore does not think that the committee as constituted will give her the threshold of confidence that she would get fair hearing. That is a legitimate concern, because all of us in society saw that happen. We saw, to the extent that even the chair of the committee had stated that her petition was dead on arrival, even though they say that they only said that in relation to the fact that she did not follow the rules. But to say that sexual harassment has not been alleged against the Senate President before, that is not logical. There's always a time when somebody finally says, I am going to take a public stance on an issue. So that really does reduce significantly the credibility of the Senate Ethics and Privileges Committee to be a judge on this matter. So any reasonable person would support the position of Senator Uduaghan. On the matter of the way forward, I think that rather than dodge this matter, a public institution, the highest lawmaking organ in our democracy, must get the feedback from the citizens. They want accountability. They want accountability. And therefore, we expect the Senate to, in a closed session amongst themselves, realize that this issue has terribly, terribly reduced the integrity of that public institution and those that sit in it. They need to know that if they continue to use the rules of the Senate as a tool for dodging accountability to our society on a matter of fair hearing and on a matter of granting opportunity to seek redress and justice by one who alleges injury, what they are saying to us is that they are the ruining block of our democracy. How can those who should uphold the sanctity of democratic principles, norms, ethos, and constitutional provisions be the ones ruining things? How can the lawmakers become the major lawbreakers?